All right, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the OutBack SystemEdge webinar. I'm really glad you could join us. My name is Paul Daly. I'm the Director of Product Management here at OutBack. So we're on the GoToWebinar platform. I think you'll see in your toolbar a little question form. If you've got questions throughout the presentation, feel free to go ahead and submit those, and I'll try to keep an eye out for them. If it's germane to the topic we're covering, I'll try to talk about it. Otherwise, we'll catch them at the end. This is a relatively short presentation. I don't expect we'll take the whole hour, so that'll give us plenty of time for Q&A at the end of it. So without any further ado, we'll jump right in. And we'll talk about our SystemEdge offerings. So for those of you who aren't familiar with SystemEdge, I'll give a brief overview of what that is. We'll talk about some of the new SystemEdge packages that we've launched recently, and then we'll dive into a little more information on how to use SystemEdge as part of your sales process and other ways that might not be obvious. That it can help you sell more systems, even if you're building largely custom ones. So, those of you familiar with battery systems know they can get fairly complex. There's a lot of parts beyond what you would typically use for a sort of grid direct kind of PD system. And what we've done with SystemEdge is really to simplify the design installation of these systems by effectively kitting everything together. So all the parts and equipment that that you're going to need but aren't necessarily going to be on your truck are going to be in here. So each SystemEdge package includes one of our FlexPower pre-wired power systems. So you'll see on the slide there, we've got our FlexPower radiant system, which includes an 8 kilowatt radiant inverter with its load center, a pair of FM80 charge controllers, and a mate system controller. And all of that's pre-wired, so basically, you just need to connect the battery to it and the loads to it, and essentially, it's just the external connections you need to make there. They also include the batteries and any associated rack for those batteries. So, again, in the picture you see there, we've got some nanocarbon batteries, the 200 NCs, and they're in one of the IBR3 pre-wired battery racks. So here, just nature of batteries, you are going to have to put those in, but the switching and the cabling is already integrated into the rack, so all you really have to do is connect the little battery bus bars together and put the covers on the rack, and you're good to go there. The new systems we're going to talk about include our ICS Plus rapid shutdown system. Some of the ones you may have been familiar with in the past included just one of our regular combiners. These new systems include the full-on ICS Plus system, and I'll talk about that and kind of why that's important a little bit later on. But that includes, all of your safety compliance requirements for whatever version of code your jurisdiction happens to be in. And of course, with the Mate 3S system controller, you're going to have access to our optics monitoring and remote control platform, which is fairly unique in the industry. It's pretty much the only publicly accessible control system like this where you can actually set up levels of control as well as information monitoring. So these systems are set up as a single SKU with a single price tag. So you can go to your usual source for OutBack equipment, whether that's a distributor or if you're one of our distributors, when you pass the order through, it's a single SKU, it's a single price, and we coordinate all the shipping and everything from there. Okay, so this. Okay, so with the new SystemEdge additions that we're going to talk about here, there's a package available for pretty much any application that's relatively common. So off-grid battery backup. We're working on some for some more daily cycling, grid-tied energy storage type applications. Those are coming. But we'll start with the stuff that I think most people are already familiar with. We've got some of you that have used these systems before are probably familiar with the SE420RE, the 830RE, and the 8100NC. So we're adding to that, almost another dozen or so systems to serve different applications. And again, we're looking at both off-grid and grid-tied battery backup kinds of systems. So most of the off-grid systems we'll talk about can be used for battery backup, as most of our equipment is grid interactive, but there's obviously a little more battery in the off-grid systems than you necessarily need for backup systems. So let's take a look at some of these new packages, and I'll kind of go through them in a little bit of detail. So first we have our cabin series. These are designed for small off-grid residential applications, typically for occasional use, like say a fishing cabin or a weekender or something like that, where you don't really have a lot of loads on it. You may not be using it all the time. This is really the kind of bare bones minimum for an off-grid system. And so let's look at one of those. That's the SE320NC. So again, pretty minimalist system. You've got an FP1 with our VFXR 3648A inverter on it. So that's a 3.6 kilowatt battery inverter. It's got an FM80, so that'll take about 4 kilowatts worth of PV, and that's coming with a 2-shelf battery rack and 8 of the Energy Cell 200NC batteries. That gives you a little less than 10 kilowatt hours a day of usable energy storage. So that's, again, you're not going to be running a lot of heating and cooling loads with something like this, but it'll take care of some lights, a relatively small refrigerator, and just a handful of things like that, maybe an occasional TV or computer use. As I mentioned, this comes with the ICS Plus, so you meet all the arc faults and rapid shutdown safety requirements, as well as, of course, all of these systems come with the May3S, so you'll get the optics access. So next up would be the Cottage series. These are intended a little more for full-time use and feature the radiant inverters. So the real difference here between, say, a Cottage series and the cabin series is with that radiant inverter, it's going to be much easier to integrate a generator with that. So if you're going to be there full time, you're in a place where you don't necessarily have real consistent solar resource. You want to put a small generator in the system. The radiant's a much easier way to go for that. So that system, it's the SE420NC, and take a look at this one. It's got the 4 kilowatt flex power radiant with a single FM80 charge controller. So again, you got about 4 kilowatts worth of PV. You've also got the full 4 kilowatts output on this one. Same battery bank as before, so about 10 kilowatt hours a day. But given that you can add a generator, that makes it a little bit more flexible, and not a whole lot more expensive here. But again, a much more flexible version of the cabin series. So moving up the line, we go to the Lodge series. These are a little bit larger power systems, bigger batteries, and the idea here is this is more for a family-style dwelling that's off-grid, something that's got a little more energy use, a little more sophisticated. type of project. So we'll look at one of those. We've got the SE750NC, excuse me, 740 RE. This one has over 7 kilowatts of power. It's got about 20 kilowatt hours of usable battery capacity, so nearly 40 nameplate, and that gives you, twice the available energy as the cabin and cottage series. This one, has the 2 FM80s on it, so it'll take up to 8 kilowatts of PV, and this one really is big enough to run most of your common household loads. 7 kilowatts is plenty of power for a home, and with that high capacity battery bank, you got plenty of energy for a modest off-grid family dwelling. You can go a little bit larger with the 750NC, so that's got the nanocarbon battery, gives you a little more flexibility there, and you get the same FP2 power system. So the nice thing with the nanocarbon batteries, if you're not familiar with them, is they're a lot less sensitive to partial state of discharge. So if you run them down a little bit and don't recharge them right away, they're not going to punish you as badly for that as a normal lead-acid battery will, because they've got a carbon nano coating on the plates themselves, and that prevents the sulfation buildup, which is basically what ultimately ends the life of most lead-acid batteries. So a little better cycle life and more flexibility out of those. Now we can move up to the Villa series. These intended for much larger off-grid systems, so big family homes, maybe multi-generational kind of homes, or eco lodges, or even some light industrial applications. So these are really some of the larger systems that we offer for off-grid without having to gang together a bunch of inverters. So first one in this set is the SE830NC. So that's basically the same as the 830RE that you might have seen before, but this one is upgraded with the nanocarbon batteries and has the ICS Plus as opposed to the FlexWare PV6 combiner. So nice, good size system. This one's kind of a nice go-to for folks that want to go and do off-grid systems and want to make sure that it's big enough to cover most everybody's needs. You're probably not going to hook a hot tub up to this thing, but you could run a small AC if you needed to, as well as your typical lights, refrigerator, entertainment system, and so forth. You can put, again, about 8 kilowatts of PV on this sucker, and it'll keep recharging those batteries as long as you've got a solar resource. So if that's not going to do it, you can move up to the 850NC. This is got one of the high capacity nanocarbon batteries in it. So it's similar to the other one. You've got the Radian 8 kilowatt flex power system, but now you got a little bit more kilowatt hours worth of batteries. 26 kilowatt hours is typically plenty for most folks, unless you're running a large heating or cooling load. This will do it for you. But if that's not big enough, then we can move into the SE14130RE. This is really as big as they get without having us customize something for you. This features a FP4 system. It's 14 kilowatts worth of inverter. You got 4 FM80s on there, so you can have 16 kilowatts of PV, and it's got a 130 kilowatt hour battery. So I mean that's 65 kilowatt hours usable on a daily basis, which is enough for even a pretty large home, and should handle reasonably efficient heating and cooling systems. The nice thing about this is most of it, with that inverter system is wall mounted, even though it is pretty large. The batteries stack up in their own custom frame design there, so it's fairly tall, but the actual footprint is not a whole lot bigger than the system with one of the IDRs, for example. So we can move on now to the backup packages. So Townhome series, this is kind of a modest, low-cost system here to handle a few vital loads. That's our SE420GH. So again, you've got your Radian 4 kilowatt version here. You can put about 4 kilowatts of PV on that, and when you're not in a backup scenario, it'll just net meter like any normal system would. But you've got these 8 Energy Cell GH batteries, and these are great for standby systems like this because there's very little self-discharge on these batteries. They'll hold up a long time in a standby mode, and there's not a lot of cycle life in those, so we do want to be careful about that. I wouldn't put these in an off-grid scenario, but if you're just going to use the system for a few days a year, then it's really a great way to go. And this is a nice small system that's relatively cost-effective, and will again, with that ICS Plus, pass most inspections, which you're going to have in a backup type system where you're out in suburbia. You're going to need all of those safety features because you will get inspected, and you've got it here with this system. For larger applications, there's the Suburban series, and these are for your more typical kind of single-family home where you've got maybe a couple thousand square feet, and you got a few more things you want to back up. We look at that. We've got the SE830GH, so that's an 8 kilowatt FP Radian system. Again, you can put up to 8 kilowatts of PV on that. It's got an extra stack of the GH batteries, so 50% more stored energy for backup use. You can run that 8 kilowatts for up to 2 hours with the battery system here. That's very rarely how you would really use it, but you can if you need to. And the nice thing about this 8 kilowatt Radian is with a surge capacity, it's really enough to turn on just about anything a typical person's going to have in their home. So even if they're going to try to turn on the air conditioner, or more often is the case, a chest freezer or something like that, or an old refrigerator, the Radian's got the guts to turn that on, and you've got enough batteries there to keep it running long enough to matter. So this is a nice system. It's good for the sort of average home. And of course, you can go bigger. At that point, you're probably going into one of the high capacity batteries, which we don't have available in the grid hybrid version, but those are also can be used in a backup scenario as well. So this table here summarizes, between the two backup systems, what you really can power with them, and it's a helpful way to think about it, especially when you're sitting down with your customer. You can say, well, if you're talking about 6 hours, here's really what what this thing would provide over, say, a 6-hour outage before you get the batteries down to the point where you need to stop draining them. And so even for the 420GH, which is a pretty modest backup system, you can run good-sized refrigerator or 2 smaller ones. You could run a TV, enough lights to kind of keep the home livable. Your computer. You've got even a small heater or something along those lines if you need to. With a 30GH, there's that much more, right? You can actually run probably most of the lights in the home, as well as a typical home entertainment center, and a fridge, and maybe even a chest freezer. So you want to look at the loads individually when you sell the system, but these are pretty robust. I mean, they're made to handle a decent amount of loads, for a short period of time. So as I mentioned, all of these new systems come with our ICS Plus rapid shutdown system. And the nice thing with the ICS Plus is it's got everything you need to make sure that the installation complies with the latest iteration of the NEC. So 2011, you got to have arc fault protection. That's in there. 2014 introduced the rapid shutdown requirement. That's in there. 2017 kind of tightened up that rapid shutdown requirement a bit, and while this isn't module level, that's not required until 2019. So this meets the current requirements of the 2017 code in that it's a listed solution, and when it's deployed in a SystemEdge package like this with other OutBack hardware, that whole system is listed together to 1741 as a rapid shutdown solution. And it's really the kind of belt and suspenders way to do this, and the inspectors like it because if they understand what's actually going on there, UL basically is saying, hey, this whole thing is fine and you don't need to worry about it. So if you haven't deployed any of these yet, get with us and we'll get you the documentation that you need. But it's really the best way to keep everybody safe and up to date with the latest codes. So here's a quick snapshot of all the new and the pre-existing SystemEdge. So we had three before. We're up to quite a few more than that now, and we're starting to kind of divide those out by application. So this gives you an idea of the range of solutions that's available. These are mostly the ones we just talked about. And as I said, you can order these with those part numbers from wherever you're getting OutBack stuff from today. So let's talk a little more about how SystemEdge can help you sell more. And I find that most salespeople will default to this kind of dialogue you've got here on the left. They jump right in. They find out the homeowner's hopes and dreams and everything that they want this battery system to do, and then before they really even get into price, they'll run off and they'll design the perfect system. And what happens is a lot of times they'll come back and everybody ends up disappointed because this perfect system that does everything that the homeowner thinks they want done is going to cost way too much and they can't afford it. And so either it has to get dialed back to something that the homeowner can't afford, which means you're going back and doing that work all over again, or you've lost the sale and that effort's all wasted. So it's much more efficient, and if you've been selling grid tie systems with any of the larger organizations, you'll see some of the some similar techniques that they use, and because it does really help you speed up the process and make it a lot more streamlined for both you and the customer. And what you do in this case is you come in and you present several options along with the pricing, and then you let the customer kind of look at that and think about what they need before they start telling you, oh, I want it to power the whole house. I want the whole house backed up. Then when they see these systems and say, hey, having the whole house backed up is going to cost quite a bit. Then they're going to think a little bit more realistically about their goals. And if you let them do that without you having to tell them no, that helps them save face and makes you a good guy, not a bad guy. So let's take a look at how this typically works. So you'd start with something like this that shows a few options. We'll make this available later to you guys as a flyer. And what I would typically do is I would write the pricing down, maybe even with a Sharpie, on the systems that you think are most relevant for this customer, or the ones that for whatever reason you want to promote. And that gives them an idea of the range of costs for these things. And you put this in front of them. You may have to explain a little bit about, hey, this one will let you back up, that, or this one here, has a more robust, longer-term battery, or whatever it is that you want to emphasize. And I would say focus on the functions as opposed to the equipment. I mean, we're very proud of our equipment, but really what you're selling here is the backup functionality. And that's really it's more capability, it's going to cost more, and that's what you want them to understand. So once you've kind of laid all that out, stand back a little bit, answer questions. They'll gravitate toward the system and the price point that's going to work for them, or at least the one that's closest to that. And this is helpful because it does something really important right off the bat. It qualifies the customer, and it also gives them reasonable expectations regarding what they can afford. So as I said before, you don't have to go and crush their dreams after spending hours designing a fancy backup system for them that they can't afford. So you save some time as well, and they can align to, hey, this is the reality. Okay, they can think in their head, and my budget's probably 20-25 grand. I'm kind of in this range, and it looks like I get this much power. So now they'll start asking good questions like, okay, so if I've got 15 kilowatt hours of available battery, what will that let me run? And you can go back to kind of that table we showed you before with kind of the load backup and so forth. The nice thing here is this is all already done. You don't have to do a lot of work with each sale. So even if they ultimately say, yeah, I can't afford any of that, my budget's $5,000, at least you haven't spent 3 hours designing a system for them. And you can move on, find the next guy. I mean, sales at the end of the day is a numbers game, and you're just going to have to keep going. Well, if you can get to twice or 3 times the customers you otherwise could, then an approach like this can really help boost your results by making it that much more efficient. But even if you end up designing something for somebody, if the conversation still goes there, at least now the customer understands, hey, this is what this stuff costs, and you understand that the customer can afford it. Now you have a much more solid foundation to design whatever system that they need that's special, and it's going to be worth your time because at the end of the day you got a good chance of actually selling it. So that's basically a big part of the value for the SystemEdge offering. Again, is whether you end up selling the kitted system or not, it's going to make your sales process that much more efficient. So that's the end of my formal presentation. Like I said, it's relatively short, so I wanted to leave plenty of time for any questions. So we'll take a look. I don't have any in yet, so I'll give you a couple minutes if you want to send me some questions. Otherwise, I'll let you all get on with your lunch or your afternoon, as the case may be. Okay, so nobody has any questions there. You could also use the chat tool if that's easier for you. Here we go. Can we copy the presentation? So we'll put this together. Probably won't be today as our person that does all that stuff is on vacation till I think the end of next week. But we'll have it out here in a little bit, along with a recording of today's session. You'll have the slides as a PDF or something like that. So yeah, we'll get that out to you. Any other questions? All right. Well, in that case, make it easy for me. No problem there. All right. Well, thank you all for attending, and hopefully you can join us for next week's webinar. I think that one's on the new UL 1741 SA requirements, and should be pretty interesting as most of us are going to have to face that here in the next few months. So hope to see you all there. All right, until next time. Thanks, everyone.